Hey guys, Jim Vinosky with Manufacturing Talks. We got a great guest for you today. His name is Luke Lloyd. He is an investment advisor by trade, but he is also a very gifted speaker on all things dealing with economy and business. And we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different things here today, manufacturing related and beyond. So tune in for Luke here in just a few minutes on Manufacturing Talks.
Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
BYS Media, your digital media relations agency. Public relations, website design, digital marketing. You get found by the customers and talent who need your solutions. You get media placements in top publications, the best job candidates coming to your website, a digital presence that gets you found by the right people. Call 616-298-8798 to get started today.
All right, guys, welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky, your host. As always, thanks to DYS Media, our sponsor. Great folks over there. Look them up. And just really happy today, have a buddy of mine joining me. His name's Luke Lloyd. He is an investment strategist. Welcome, Luke.
Jim, thanks for having me, man. I was just telling you, I'm always ready to rock and roll. And I think there's a lot of things happening around this world, and I think we're going to hit on a lot of that stuff right now.
We got lots to talk about. I should mention, you're a regular with Neil Cavuto and folks like that. Now you've hit the big time. You're on manufacturing.
That's right. Dude, I've been dreaming of this day my entire life. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. No, seriously, I really do appreciate you having me on. I know we've had many great discussions about the world, the manufacturing industry, small business, especially the car industry. I really think that what you're doing for your manufacturing industry, for your world is amazing, man, and you should be very
well. Thank you. Yeah, and it's great to have folks like you on to kind of expand beyond the day-to-day world of manufacturing. So let's start off. Just talk about yourself and how you got.
I want to talk about myself. That's not what's important. It's what's going on in this world that's important, right? Now, I guess my short story is I'm a small town boy, man. I grew up Southeast Ohio, small town. I always had big aspirations, big dreams of moving to the city. But frankly, I just enjoy people and being around people. And I always loved money. When I say I loved money, I didn't love making money. I loved the concept of money, what it could do, right? Innovate, capitalism. I loved the flow of money throughout the economy and how it created freedom. That's what I loved about studying that. So I ended up moving to New York City for a little bit. When you grow up in small town Ohio with guns, trucks, all that stuff, you go to New York City, it's a big culture shock, right? But I met a lot of cool people, including where I'm at today with my current firm and my current mentor, who I view as my mentor, Mark Tepper. That's where I met him, and it's been a fun ride ever since then. Now living in Cleveland, Ohio, and get to go do some pretty cool stuff up here now.
Awesome. And I should mention, I was coming back from the beach last month and came up on the return trip through Southern Virginia and West Virginia, and I find myself out where I have no idea where I am. I grew up in Upper Michigan in the middle of nowhere. I was born in West Virginia. So being in the middle of nowhere is not that disconcerting, but it's like, I don't even know where I am on the map. And then I got to Weston, Ohio, and realized where I was.
That's how most of it is down there in Southeast, Ohio, West Virginia, that border area, right? But I'm very thankful I got to grow up there. I mean, it's very beautiful. I couldn't wait to get out of the area growing up. And as you get older, I think you start to realize, you start to appreciate where you come from, the family values that you were taught, the tight-knit communities, the beautiful scenery, the hills. I mean, I love going back now and just, being around family and really trying to take it all in when I didn't take it all in when I was younger, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. First of all, it is gorgeous country down there. And I just love to get back up to the UP where I'm from. And
the UP is nice too. You got Mackinac Island up there. And, it's absolutely beautiful. But that being said, it's still in Michigan though, Jim. Come on. Ohio,
what Michigan, are you going to do? All right. So you went to school, you lived in New York, and then I know you did some other stuff, but the thing that caught my eye in your background as I looked through it is you co-founded a coffee company. and I wanted to hear about that.
Yeah. So this goes back to the study of money, right? And I've always been entrepreneurial. Let's take a step back a little bit. Growing up, I went to garage sales and bought things, for that I thought I could sell online for a higher price. So I was trying to arbitrage some items there, and that's what basically helped get my savings up a little bit, right, and have some extra spending power. So I went to college, and I actually started up a social media marketing company where I went on social media. It's when Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff was becoming bigger. And I started growing these accounts to market for businesses, and that ended up working out pretty well as well. So I've always been entrepreneurial, and I met this guy in my sophomore year of college, in the same dorm hall as me. He was passionate about all things coffee, and he was actually my RA, so he was kind of my boss. He was making sure that I wasn't doing anything crazy in the dorm rooms in college. But anyway, so I met him, and I'm like, hey, this is really cool with what you're doing. I can help you from a marketing standpoint. I run these social media marketing, business on the side, or business while I'm in college. I said, I'd love to help you out from a marketing standpoint, and maybe a financing standpoint, a sales standpoint. So at the same time, there's another guy that I was close friends with that wanted to kind of join the party as well. So all three of us, kind of fell into our roles within the company. Daniel was his name. The Daniel Jennings was his name, who was the main coffee roaster guy, and he roasted coffee in a garage outside of the college. And we started becoming well known around the local community. We outsourced it to the local coffee shop. And we kept on running with it, and it ended up getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But then what happens with college is you graduate college, right? And you go your separate ways. So I never got equity in the business, but the company is still going on in Columbus, Ohio, and is very successful. So
Awesome.
The coffee name is Jennings Java, and they just actually opened up their own coffee shop. I'm no longer a part of it. I helped start it up, but this is why you start learning lessons. Maybe get a little bit of equity stake. It was a big lesson to be learned.
No, it's really cool. And of course, that touches a little bit on my world of manufacturing. So always appreciate that someone has, at least a tie to what I always say is the crucible of the business world. And so, talking about that and your experience with those various businesses, and even going back to your kind of, trading days with things you bought and sold. As you look at how it was in the past and where we are today, what are kind of your big call outs with the economy now?
So I've been a big prominent speaker about how this whole economy is being held up by debt. I've been talking about debt a lot, how access to credit's different now than access to credit's higher than it ever has been. But the ease of access is really what concerns me, right? The access to high credit limits on your credit cards, going out and buying really, frankly, cars that a lot of people can't afford that they still buy anyway. Over leveraging on your houses. I mean, middle class America right now, I think 20% of houses are affordable to middle class America. But the key word there is affordable. I don't think a lot of people realize what is affordable and what's not affordable now with the access to credit, right? So I think one of the things that we really need to pay attention to from a small business owner perspective, from a consumer perspective, is making sure that you're able to handle any kind of economic downturn right now, because I feel like no one's prepared. I think 60% of Americans can't afford $1,000 emergency expense, right? The question to ask is, if I were to lose my job, how many months of my mortgage and my car payments could I afford? And really, I mean, if you have less than 1 year of savings, emergency savings available, then you really need to get that up, because at any point in time, one snowball could make a chain reaction happen with this whole debt cycle that we've been in. And all we've done from a government perspective is bail out everything. And we keep on delaying the inevitable, right? We keep printing trillions of dollars. We add more deficit. We raise the debt ceiling. You just saw today that the debt was downgraded in the United States. I mean, it's basically safer to own Apple bonds than it is the U.S. government bonds. So, I mean, it's concerning right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. In my career, I've had to move around quite a bit. I think I'm in my 10th house that I've owned. And every single time my wife and I have gone to buy a house, they tell us, here's kind of what you can afford at your income level. And it's just insanity. And it's like 10 times what I would buy a house for that I could actually get a loan for. It's just crazy.
It is. I mean, and when rates rise, from a housing standpoint, the rates go from 2.5% to 7% in like a year and a half, which is the quickest rise in interest rates ever in history. And who knows, you might be even going higher. People are still like YOLO, you only live once mentality. Maybe it's the younger generations. Maybe it's all generations. I frankly think it's all generations. They're kind of like, we're just going to live in debt our entire life because we have to live this kind of American dream that they think that they perceive that they have to live. And it's kind of the keeping up with the Joneses mentality. Like my buddy's got a bigger house than I do, so I got to get a bigger house. I mean, it's at the end of the day, is the American dream really living in debt your entire life? I mean, I think we got to have a wake-up call here in America. Yep,
agreed. And you mentioned the government printing money, and that's a big focus that I'm on here with manufacturing. You hear stories everywhere today about all the subsidies and all the loans and things going to these new factories. And you can kind of get a sense that I'm not a big fan, but what's your take on all that?
Well, the key word there is, subsidiaries and picking the winners and losers. I mean, the government is more involved in our life than ever. And at the end of the day, you go back to, I'm a big preacher of it, classic liberalism, right? The libertarian kind of perspective is the power to the people and power to companies, the power of the free markets. I mean, we are so far away from what America was supposed to be, what our founding fathers wanted America to be. The fact that the government is more involved not only in our personal lives with tax dollars, whatever it be, but also in company lives, business lives, whether it's printing money, tax credits. You see that with, I know we've talked about it before, Tesla and electric vehicles. Like, at the end of the day, the free markets are best at picking the winners and losers. The free markets are best at balancing out, how much someone should be paid too. I mean, frankly, the fact that that we're living this world now. I mean, as you know, Jim, in manufacturing, like you got to show up to work and you got to do your job and you got to add productivity, right? The fact that these, I'll say go as far as say these elitist kind of mentalities of I got to work from home 3 or 4 days out of the week, or I deserve 25, 30 days off a year, or I deserve to be paid a certain amount, but I also want all these benefits as well. You can't have the best of many worlds. I mean, the fact that we are so lazy and had least amount of productivity in this world is all a culprit of government intervention being more involved in our life and printing dollars and that kind of thing, right?
Yep. I just saw an article the other day about how this massive printing has just created this whole class of people who believe they deserve a seat at the table, telling all the rest of us how to live our lives.
And they want more and more and more. Everyone's greedy. Right. Everyone is greedy. Everyone says, "Oh, the rich are greedy." No, I mean, right now the people not wanting to work are greedy.
Well, that's true too. You don't want to pick on the downtrodden, but again, I just saw an article today about a very well-meaning guy talking about a local program, where they had gotten a $750,000 grant to provide housing through some local manufacturers. And I commented on it on LinkedIn saying, so you're taking a bunch of money from people who are already struggling to pay their own bills and giving it to people so they have free housing. And how is that just and fair?
Yeah. I mean, all we do is, the same problems that we're trying to fight, that people are trying to fight, usually end up shooting themselves in the foot. And what I mean by that is you want stimulus, you want free money from the government. Well, you get that, you get inflation, right? That's the culprit of that. Yeah. So you kind of shoot yourself in the foot. Okay. I'll even go as far as say, what's happening with, you saw Yell, the trucking company, that go under. You saw UPS strikes happening. And I'm not even going down the path of unions, but the thing that they're fighting for, I mean, if you want more pay, add a little bit more productivity. If you get more pay and you don't add more productivity outside of what just inflation is, right, you get all these extra perks. Then when any kind of economic downturn happens, you get laid off your job, you get fired, right? You're quicker to lose your job. So, I mean, it's like everything you wish for, be careful with what you wish for is what I'm trying to say. And I think people need to really get out of that mindset of they're owed something, because no one's owed anything in this world. Yeah, you really went in a direction I think we've strayed away from at our peril, and that is that self-sufficiency and that responsibility for your own life. We're all busy pawning it off on everyone else in the government, and you're right that in the end it gets you, not the other people in the government. Exactly. I mean, it's I don't know. I feel like it's weird. We live in this kind of narcissistic world, but at the same time this group think world as well, where we kind of we think we're individualistic, but we're really not. And I think we got to get back to true individualism. And I think the phones, these kind of things, these groupthink mentalities, these echo chambers, really mess with our brains sometimes. And I think we sometimes got to tune that all out, go to the beach and go meditate and really get in our head and think what we truly believe and why we do what we do, and ask the question why and ask the question why again.
Yeah, agreed. You mentioned something I definitely wanted to touch on, and that is the downgrade by Fitch of the U.S. debt. And, that's over the heads of most people. I mean, heck, it's a little over the head for me. So given your expertise here, tell people what the impact in the real world of something like that is.
Yeah. So there's a lot of impact. Let's take a step back to 2011 when this happened for the first time in history. We right coming out of the recession, there were a lot of debt ceiling talks, and we talk about the government being very inefficient. It's because they are very inefficient. And both sides are culprits of it. Democrats, Republicans, they both spend a lot of money. They both keep on raising the debt ceiling just for different reasons. So back in 2011, there was a big debt ceiling debate. I think it was S&P downgraded the U.S. government debt in 2011, which caused the stock market to crash actually 15% in 2 weeks. That's the impact on the market that could happen maybe again. I'm not saying it's going to happen for the full extent, 15% this time around, but we could see, we're already seeing the market down 2% today. We could keep on going down because what's perceived, the perception is that it's risky for the U.S. government to lend out dollars, right? Yeah. And frankly, we always think the U.S. government can print money. That's what got us here in the first place. They can't just keep on printing money. Right. They eventually had to pay off their debts. And what's concerning is rates where they're at and the pace of how far they went up, they had to refinance all this debt at higher rates. So the fact that our GDP, I think our GDP is like, $20 trillion or something right along those lines. Our interest payments are becoming like almost a quarter of our GDP. Eventually, if we keep down this path, our interest payments are going to be the same as our GDP, and you can't climb out of that hole. So that's the big long-term concern. And what the impact on middle-class America, all Americans, is that we all pay for it either through inflation, taxes, or interest rates. And who gets screwed in the end is truly middle-class America. We already saw inflation rise. Now we're paying for it through interest rates. And guess what's going to happen down the road? Higher taxes. That's what the true impact long-term.
Right. Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about that kind of lead up to all this, because I know people have been warning about some of these impacts for years. And yet, because of things like quantitative easing and the different interventions that the Fed and the government were able to do in the economy, they were able to stave things off for a while. But it seems to me we're getting to that point where the levers just aren't working anymore.
You're exactly right with that, Jim. We keep on delaying the inevitable. The free markets haven't operated efficiently. We lived in a 0% rate environment for a long time. In fact, we have a central banking system in itself as a socialistic policy. And the government was a lot different. I just talked about it with Scott the Cow Guy actually today. The federal government, or the Federal Reserve, was created in 1913. The world's a lot different than it was in 1913, right? In 1913, you didn't have access to credit. You didn't have cars in 1913. Nobody had cars in 1913, right? So nobody was living on credit. No one was living on debt. So the Federal Reserve was able to control interest rates, which helped slow down or speed up, I guess, business spending. Now it's all about consumer spending because of the amount of debt we're living on. So I think that we live in a very inefficient system now that is very government controlled, that is very involved by the government, that's screwing over the majority of Americans. So the question is how far can this Ponzi scheme go? I'll go as far as say that we live in a big Ponzi scheme by the government, right? So how far can this Ponzi go before we actually pull back and let the free markets reset themselves? The bad part there is, not to get too deep, for the free market system to reset itself, we got to go through some pain because of everything we've done the past 30, 40 years. We have to go through some pain. And the politics side is no politician wants to address that because, automatically every American will hate that party or that person because they actually fixed the issue.
Yep. So then let's kind of channel it back into my world. If we talk about manufacturers in particular in the current economic state, what should the producers of America be thinking about, be planning for, that kind of thing?
So I think it's all, for me, I'm a supply side kind of guy, right? The more supply we have in an economy, the better. And that all comes from lower regulation, lower taxes. At the end of the day is how you get more supply out there and more power to the free market. So I guess to operate in this system outside of lower taxes, lower regulation, which is really, outside of who you can vote for to try to change that, I guess, you personally, I guess, have to pay attention to workers. It's all about talent. And a lot of my generation, a lot of the Gen Zs, millennials, people nowadays are lazy. So it's really about differentiating yourself to make sure you get the best talent out there, to make sure that you're able to counteract these higher taxes, these higher regulations that may be a stepping stone or a roadblock to your business. Because at the end of the day, everything's about people, and it's about retaining good employees, incentivizing good employees, but also making sure that you attract the right people in the right spots, operating a business efficiently, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's something I've touched on here is that whole workforce development piece, that manufacturers should be directly involved in that, where they might have been relying on outside entities to provide that workforce for them in the past.
Well, I think our good friend Matt Goosey, who I'll mention on here,
yes,
he's got a great program where he's actually integrated with like high school seniors all around his area, right? So he's got the first view of the best talent there is, essentially, with his program. Yeah, he's donating machines. He's very involved. I believe he's doing that. But he's also got the first view of the best talent out there to eventually get into his company, right? So you got to be unique in this world, right? You got to be the first visible, and you got to differentiate yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I had Matt's buddy Craig Sigelski on the show a few months ago. He's running this company within his local high school. The shop itself is a company producing goods for the local industries, and that to me is just the perfect example, something very local, very small, introducing kids, not just to the technical aspects, the shop classes, but running that business. They do everything within that business, marketing, sales, accounting, all the different aspects, and they all have a hand in it. Yeah, those guys, they're a phenomenal example of what people need to be doing.
Oh, absolutely. But again, it's about having the right people in the right places. Like everything at the end of the day is sales, right? Yeah. Everything's about getting out there from a sales perspective, from a marketing standpoint. And, from a business development perspective, I mean, it depends. Every business is different, but if you want more business, you got to make sure you have the right business development folks. If you have enough business, and you need the right people to make sure that you're able to manufacture enough, right? It's all supply and demand. That's how the world works.
Yep. So that being said, we talked about it being something of a mess, and there's definitely warning signs with the credit rating and a lot of people struggling, but there's also a whole bunch of money still sloshing around out there, more coming from the Biden administration. What do you think is going to happen for the next 5 to 10 years in the business world?
I think there's a lot of hurdles we have to hop over. I think rates will probably go higher. Things will become more expensive before they get cheaper, frankly, right? Things will get worse, essentially, before they get better from a standpoint of borrowing money, capital expenditure, innovation cycle. So I definitely think that, inflation will remain a concern. Interest rates are top of mind. I don't think there's any necessarily fixing the economy from a government standpoint. Frankly, I think the answer is less policy is good policy, and I don't think the government will do that. I think the Republicans will try to fix things if they do get in there. Let's pretend they get in there any point in the next decade or so. I think they'll try to go in there with good intentions, but their policies will be just as involved in our life, right? At the end of the day, we just need to let things reset, like I said. I think there's going to be an opportunity for innovation, though. I think that there is going to be some sort of economic downturn. And usually throughout history, economic downturns produce the most innovation, right? Mm-hmm. So I think this is an opportunity for entrepreneurial, whether it's manufacturing, technology, AI, whatever it be. I think this is an opportunity for the small dogs to finally get ahead in some sort of ways, as long as they're able to survive. The big corporations, big businesses just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, mainly because of the separation that the government's made. If economic downturn happens, which I think it ultimately will, with some sort of recession, it's going to try to reset some things, right? In that resetting moment is when the small dogs are able to kind of win back what they've lost the past decade, the past 3 years especially.
So that's really interesting. You're the first one I've heard take an optimistic view of small business in today's environment. I think pretty much everyone now acknowledges that the government has played favorites radically favoring the big businesses. And that's, of course, who all the subsidies are going to now. But I think you're onto something there, is that now you look at what's going on with the automakers, and these big businesses are becoming ossified. They're becoming stuck in their ways and very uninnovative. And I love what you're saying there. The small guys have that opportunity.
What's going to happen is from 2009 so look how many tech companies, let's just go technology route.
Yeah,
this is easy.
yeah.
So many tech companies existed that were created in 2009 to 2022, essentially, or this year, that were unprofitable. They like, all these, the Ubers of the world. Uber's a little different because they actually just turned profitable, which is, they've done a great job.
Yep,
but like,
yep.
The Carvanas of the world, a lot of these companies are zombie companies that really shouldn't have never existed. They never will be able to turn a profit. They weren't able to turn a profit in a low rate environment. How the heck are they going to be able to turn a profit in a high rate environment? So I think you're going to see you've seen it this year already, bankruptcies tick up, and especially some of the larger names, larger tech names. You've seen some bankruptcies happen. I think some bankruptcies will continue, but it's going to be kind of a clearing of the froth, right? So a lot of the companies that were never supposed to exist will go away, and it's going to provide an opportunity for those that actually do have a good differentiated product to really gain that market share back. That's what I mean by it's an opportunity for small business to somewhat get back on track, even though it might not be ideal. It might be a little expensive, might be a little risky. I am trying to stay optimistic, because at the end of the day, all we have is a little bit of optimism, because if we continue down this path, America might not be around 40 years down the road. So,
well, and I've tried to be that way myself. It's easy to be pessimistic with all the just stupid things we're doing, quite frankly. But you mentioned something else that sparked a thought, and that is everyone says all these bankruptcies are a huge negative, and everyone bemoans when a company goes under, but that's not necessarily the case. It's not always an overall negative. Yeah, it's bad for the owners, it's bad for the investors, and bad for the employees of that company. But it was Joseph Schumpeter, right, who came up with the concept of creative destruction, and that's kind of where you were talking about.
That exactly. So sometimes you need to have destruction to come out ahead in the end, right? And that's what the free markets do. I mean, the fact that we have recessions in the first place are healthy. The problem is when they're caused by the government is when they're unhealthy. But the natural cycles of bringing things back into equilibrium, it promotes growth, it promotes innovation, it promotes the right functioning of the economy. And the fact that we've been so far away from that, and the fact that we haven't had a recession, I don't consider 2020 a recession, right? Even though we had 2 negative quarters, technically that was a recession, but really, the fact that people keep on spending their credit cards, the fact that we keep on delaying this, it's only going to make things worse in the end. So I'd rather have some short-term pain for long-term gain, I'll say, rather than long-term pain for short-term gain, right? Right.
Yeah, we just keep kicking the can down the road otherwise, right?
Yeah, we do.
And clearing the deadwood is, in the end, a positive in a lot of ways. So agree with you there. And phenomenal discussion on the business side, but there's a couple things we got to hit on before we wrap up. And one of those is I saw on your profile that you're a bourbon fan.
Love bourbon, love cigars. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
So the reason I bought my house is I have a little bar that's detached from my house. It's like my man cave. So it's like my humidor in there. I got my bourbon lined up. So it's my safe space. Go back there, smoke my bourbon or smoke my cigars, drink my bourbon, watch on a football game. I'd say my favorite is Basil Hayden. What's your favorite, Jim?
Well, I have to say beforehand that I worked for several years in the bourbon world, which was phenomenal. It was great fun.
That's cool.
Yep. And got down to pretty much all the players down in Kentucky and got some behind the scenes tours being an insider. And that was great fun. And I learned a lot and tasted a lot of great bourbon. But what I learned in the end is I have no business drinking bourbon.
Well, I don't think anyone technically has business drinking bourbon, but it's a good social thing. At the end of the day, this goes back to my whole thing. Like, everything's about people. I'm generally interested in people. I love having deep conversations, good discussions. I think we need to do that more in today's world, is have good discussions, not just debates and like why you're right, why I'm right, you're wrong. Frankly, what I like to do is invite my friends over who we really all have different opinions. We smoke a cigar, we drink some bourbon, we solve the world's problems. I like that stuff. It gets me thinking differently too.
and trust me, I'm no teetotaler, but I want to hit on this, and that is you talked about us needing to get back to that kind of rugged individualism, but the other kind of tangent to that is, yes, people were much more individualistic when it came to self-reliance, when it came to supporting themselves and not foisting everything off on government and their fellow man. But we also had very strong communities. And you're right, we've got to get back to that. The reason I say I shouldn't be drinking bourbon, though, is I'm a longtime beer drinker. And I drink my bourbon a little too fast. So it doesn't work out very well.
I mean, I like beer too. Miller Lite specifically. I'm a Miller Lite kind of guy. But yeah, I mean, it's all of that community feel. I mean, look at what I'll bring up the whole Jason Aldean thing. I'll bring it up. I don't know if you want to go down this path or not.
Sure.
I'll bring it up. Like the fact that he got so much slack for talking about how crime isn't tolerated in small towns, how stomping on American flags isn't tolerated in small towns. The fact that we live, everyone's getting pushed to the city. It's like, this goes back to my whole theory of you'll rent everything and you'll be in debt and you'll own nothing. It's kind of like the path we're on, right? The American dream was to, have a house, but also what people forget is to have a family. We're so far away from family values. We're so far away from patriotic American values. What made us, great in the first place of the, free market capitalism, individualistic thinking. No one has kids anymore. Younger generations aren't having kids. I mean, it's like everyone's selfish nowadays, and having a kid is the most selfless thing you can ever do, right? I don't have kids yet. I want them down the road. I'm still in my selfish, I guess, phase, but I recognize that having kids is the most selfless thing you can do. I mean, the fact that we aren't having kids is a concern in itself, right?
Yep.
The fact that we are trying to promote, bad things as being good in today's world, which is kind of a moral religious kind of compass as well. I'm not saying you have to be Catholic, Hindu, Buddhist. I don't care what you are, but you need a moral foundation. We're far away from that. And that's my big concern.
Well, we are farther away broadly than we've been in the past. But what Jason Aldean pointed out is you go to a small town and we're not that far away from it. That's what I love about my manufacturing world too, is we're in the real world. Yeah. We still have a lot of those values and we still uphold a lot of those moral precepts that we celebrated in the past. And what really hacked off Jason Aldean's enemies is he held the mirror up to them, and they were forced to look at the colossal failures they brought to this country.
For sure. They had to look at themselves. At the end of the day, you have to be okay with yourself. And I feel like so many people aren't okay with themselves. Now, just, this is the group think. They aren't individualistic. They are going with the group. Whether they believe it is right or wrong or not, they go with what the group thinks because they fit in, right? We live in this, again, narcissistic world where everyone wants to fit in. They want to be, popular, good, whatever it be, and that's not necessarily a good thing. It's all about, the helping your neighbor kind of mentality. Where I grew up, I had a neighbor that was basically like grandfather and grandmother to me. They weren't family, but they felt like family, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone looked out for each other. I only lived 10 minutes outside of the city here, but I don't have that. I mean, I've lived here for about 5 years, in my 2.5, 3 years in my house, but I'm close with maybe one neighbor or so, but I don't know anyone else. It just, you don't have that in the bigger cities areas. And frankly, people don't want that nowadays. And everyone is looking out for themselves, not other people.
Yeah. And I think along with those economic principles that we talked about getting back to, there is that societal and moral aspect that we also have to kind of reclaim.
Look how materialistic we are in today's world. I mean, why, again, you have to ask the question, why? What is this thing going to make me happy, right?
Right.
Is buying this, Mercedes over a Honda Civic going to make me happy? Is buying a bigger house going to make me happy? At the end of the day, what I've realized, Jim, is the less I have, the happier I am, I think. Frankly, I want freedom. Is what makes me happy is being free. And most people are slaves to the system. And I'm a Pink Floyd kind of guy, rock and roll kind of guy. Welcome to the machine, baby. We're living in this machine and everyone's a slave to the machine.
Yep. And that's not to say there haven't been areas of progress. And, along with acknowledging some of these steps we've taken back, we should acknowledge, we're a much more tolerant, much more accepting society than we've been in the past. We don't want to go back on that. But tolerance and acceptance does not mean you accept criminals running roughshod over your cities, right?
Well, it's precedents. We're setting bad precedents, right?
Yep.
It's like the pendulum swings is intentionally swinging to be right. It is swinging to be morally better, but the pendulum swings too far into the fact that we go from morally better to this is really bad and we should really take it back, right? So the pendulum goes from one side to the other, and I think we are really far on one side, and we got to come back to some sort of equilibrium on moral foundations, and we will. And this is where the system does reset itself. We kind of we already are seeing that, I think, some aspects with all kinds of different political policies and spectrums. We see that in the free markets. People are rebelling against certain things. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to be I'm a libertarian. Again, I want the government to stay out of my business. People have the right to do whatever they do as long as it doesn't infringe on me. That's my philosophy.
Agreed. One last thing we got to touch on, then we got to wrap it up. And you touched on it a little bit already. Music. But you are yourself a musician, right?
I wouldn't call myself a musician, but I can shred a little bit on the guitar. Yeah.
Good.
So this is another thing. I think everyone should learn how to play some musical instrument. It's a meditational thing for me. And it's something that I feel like does open up a different kind of part of your brain, right? I'm very thankful my parents. So growing up, I listened to classical music while sleeping. My parents made me listen to Mozart and Beethoven while I slept.
Okay.
So I think it helped kind of unlock a musical side. So my parents got me into guitar at 7 years old. And it's one of those things. I played guitar from 7 to 17. I went to music lessons. Very thankful my parents took me to that. Got me involved in that. It's one of those things, once you learn, you can't really I don't play as much anymore as I should, as much as I want to. But, it's one of those things, once you learn, you can never really fully get it out of your head. So I can still shred some Van Halen.
Very cool. I never really learned to be much of a musician myself. I picked up blues harmonica as a young adult and was able to actually sit in on open mic nights on Beale Street in Memphis. Played with a couple bands. So I know what you're saying. Definitely.
That's cool.
Up.
Can you sing? I would trade everything to be able to sing.
I can't sing. No. Well, I can carry a tune, but you don't want me being your lead singer. Let's put it.
I wish I could sing. It'd be awesome to just do karaoke in front of everyone. You can't carry a guitar around to do karaoke, but you have your voice. You can go up there and just impress the crowd, true. Right? So I don't know. Wish I could sing.
What's your? Are you a fan of heavy metal?
I like everything except truly country. I like everything but country. Frankly.
So every Friday, as part of this show, I do what I call manufacturing metal on LinkedIn. I post a heavy metal video and
how heavy are we talking?
Pardon?
How heavy are we talking?
So I'm like an 80s headbanger. We're talking
Metallica type deal.
Metallica was my featured band just a couple weeks ago. Judas Priest, Iron Maiden.
Yeah. Motley Crue. I saw Motley Crue and Def Leppard in concert. Their tour did last year. That was cool. Yeah, very
cool. So, I tie it to each week's episode. It's kind of episode comes out on Tuesday, Friday. I do the manufacturing metal and connect it back to that week's episode.
That's an awesome name too.
Yeah, that metal. Extra push.
That's awesome.
So, what's your favorite heavy metal band? We'll use that.
Van Halen. Van Halen's my all-time favorite. That's why I reference. I think Eddie Van Halen is the best guitarist of all time, in my opinion. But I mean, like I said, I like metal, I like heavy metal, and I like heavy metal. I'll take even the screaming stuff, Jim. I'll take the Asking Alexandria, the Bullet for My Valentine, the Avenged Sevenfold. I'll take some of that too.
Yeah. The only thing that I found I don't like is I was looking up newer metal bands because I'm talking about these that go back to the 1980s, a long time ago. So I thought, well, as I go forward on this, I should be able to include some newer bands, and there are some really great sounding bands out there. But the one negative that just does not appeal to me is it's like this devil voice that is just everywhere now in the metal scene.
Double voice. I don't know if I know exactly.
No, the devil.
Devil voice. Yeah.
What's up with that?
I don't know. So I went through a heavy phase where I just love I love playing. I dropped my guitar. I don't know if you know much about drop tuning, but I've dropped my guitar tuning to C,
Yep.
where it just sounds super. I love the sound of that. I don't necessarily like the singing. I just like the drum beat and the guitar strums, the heavy drums.
Yeah.
That's what I like about it. Say it again.
Disturbed?
I like Disturbed. Yeah, they're good.
To me, they were this breakthrough when it came to putting drums out front. I said at one point, you could argue that Disturbed, especially their early stuff, the lead instrument was the drums.
So yeah, I mean, my brother played drums. I can never play drums. But drums are. There's some the bass. No one recognizes how important the bass is, but the bass is probably one of the most important.
Okay, Luke, I'm gonna have to shut you off there. My brother is a bass player, and we make fun of him all the time, so I can't give him any credibility about being important in this band.
So I'm a bass head. So in my younger days, I used to run 4 12-inch subwoofers in the back of my car. I had 3,000 watts powering the subwoofers. So I actually got pulled over when I was 17 years old. I got pulled over by the cops, and the cop knocked on my door, and he's like, "I can hear your car from 4 miles away. You were shaking my car." That's how much of a bass head I am.
That's awesome.
I didn't get a ticket though. He let me go. I said, "I'll turn it down."
That's a cool cop right there.
That's right.
Well, fabulous, Luke. Anything to wrap up? Any last thoughts that people should take away from this episode?
I think that there's a couple takeaways. One is prepare for the worst. Don't be afraid to prepare for the worst and look to the future and stop. We don't live in the present mentally, but we also don't need to spend in the present and not think about the future. So think about the future. If something bad were to happen, are you going to be okay? I think that's a question you need to ask yourself, number one. Number two is don't be afraid to stand up for what you believe in, because I think so many people on one side are very, very out loud and are very loud, frankly. And then people on the other side aren't as loud. So I think we got to, I don't care what you believe in, but just, stay true to what you believe in and stop group thinking, right? Start really thinking truly about why you believe what you believe, and then ask the question, why again? What is influencing me to think this way? Is it other people, or do I actually believe this?
Yeah. Both excellent points, Luke. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Jim. Always appreciate it, my friend.
Good deal. And of course, thank all of you for being here as well. We're here every Tuesday, so tune back in next week. This was a very cool episode. I cannot promise they're all going to be this cool, but they are going to be cool. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.